that, those problems you talk about, the neighbourhood problems, were they something that the European Union could have done anything about?
It is a responsibility for war crimes and cooperation with the ICTY. That's the first thing. And secondly, after the war, Croatia has a relatively huge Serbian minority. It was very important to establish fair conditions for the minority in Croatia, to be inclusive, to ensure their participation in our social, civil, and political life. And that was very, very important.
It is one of the pillars of joining the European Union that a country has gone as far as it can in trying to stamp out corruption. And yet we saw the European Union desperate to get Greece involved. And the corruption in that country at the time was such that the European Union really didn't even look at the Greek bank sheet, and we saw where that went. Is it a case of saying one thing and doing another?
The issue with Greece was a little bit more complicated. It was not only the corruption. It adds up to the problems we faced, and that's why also the reaction from the EU institution was much more complex than addressing just one single issue.
But I was frequently visited by ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of justice for EU countries, somehow always claiming about corruption. And then I put on the table the final argument. Yes, we still have corruption, but let's see who is giving bribe. We had so many cases that bribe was coming from EU countries. And those countries were not willing to prosecute those always citizens for corruption. I think now European Union is on borderline, and it has to make decision whether we are going to have more or less Europe. That means more powers, more responsibility, more common activities. And I think this approach, more Europe, is going to make European as a good project for future. If we continue with philosophy, less Europe, I don't know what will be the future. That's the important reason.
I think you were saying, Mr. President, that you two countries started negotiations on the same day. Look where Croatia's gone. Why is Turkey where it is today?
Well, I think we will celebrate the 60th anniversary of the first application to the European entity. So I think we shouldn't start with where we started negotiations with Croatia, but it shows how stubborn, how decided, how tolerant, and how patient Turkey is to maintain this relation.
I think we used to make some mistakes by taking for granted all the extremely important achievements Europe had in the past years. I make just 3 examples on the security. It is thanks to Europe that I, as Italian judge, can take a terrorist arrested in the Netherlands after 3 weeks in Rome without any kind of rogatory procedure. Secondly, it is thanks to Europe that I freely move from Portugal to Vilnius without being controlled at the borders with my car. Thirdly, it is thanks to Europe that I have a roaming system throughout Europe without paying huge amount of money as was in the past. People tend to take for granted. That said, there is a reason why Italians were dissatisfied with the functioning of Europe as it is today, because we see a huge gap between the European Brussels narrative. Everything is okay. Everything is going okay. You are to be blamed because of national mistakes, while Europe is always right. And the reality in my country is the reality of the country that used to be the most pro-European country. At a certain moment, we felt to be left alone vis-à-vis migration crisis, to be left alone vis-à-vis need to get out of the tunnel of the crisis because some German-led austerity fiscal policies denying any kind of investment. So austerity versus growth, immigration versus isolation. This was the route leading Italian voters to vote for those that are reluctant vis-à-vis.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Bozkır, and ask you to comment on what you've just heard, but also particularly when we're talking about the refugee, the migrant problem, whether Turkey feels it has been helped or let down by the European Union in this case, because we're talking 3.5 million refugees here. I know some money has come from the European Union, perhaps not all that was promised.
Well, our problem is we don't have any difficulty to work together with the European Union, which is on an issue which is considered as a threat to peace and stability, to everyday life. And this unforeseen illegal migration flow was actually something nobody was expecting. We were threatened by every day 5,000 illegal immigrants flying or going to Greek islands, then to Europe. But at that moment, we really did well. We had great cooperation. But the problem is not the money here. It is solidarity, to see that we are with the European Union in difficult times, and the European Union is with us in our difficult times.
I think the solidarity and engagement is on the long list of the challenges the European Union has to address among its own member states and between the EU and its neighborhood. Can I come to the sort of two basic questions, and you yourself ask the basic question. You ask whether one size fits all. I think this is a crucial question ahead of the European Union, and it's going to define how you answer this question. It defines whether the European Union will be some kind of closed club behind the fence, or whether it will be an inclusive club where you have the various level of engagement and cooperation with those who find the rules in this club attractive. I think what has happened is that in European project, because it's very much about the norms, rules, and so on, this becomes so complicated and so technical that people just let the politicians to play their games in Brussels, to build the institutions and so on. When the life was good, when the prosperity was there, people flourished and so on, the people did not ask the politicians, you know, to be responsible for certain steps. They didn't ask what you actually do in Brussels. The situation changed. We have realized we don't have real crisis management in the European Union. All the crises we are prepared for are the crises we already sort of went through. And it is in this environment the people sort of are fed up because, you know, the basic instinct of politician, if something happens, is what? To go to Brussels? To work with others behind the table? Unfortunately not. The base political instinct for European politicians is to go to your constituency, to your state, you know, to make sure that once you elected, that you elected also for the second time and so on. You're trying to find a national solution to a supranational issue. You find out later on, sooner or later, unfortunately on many occasions later on, that you cannot find the solution which will not be at the expense of your neighbors, of your allies in NATO and the EU. So you come to the Brussels again, but unfortunately the issue at stake, an issue in your hands, much bigger.
So I think that the European Union, if we want to have European Union, to be capable to compete with the United States, especially in new conditions with President Trump's new doctrine, America First, if we want to be equal partner to Russia, to China, then the European Union should have clear consistency in some values and some rules. And decision-making process should be of quality to ensure that Europe can appear on the scene. If we do not this, then we are talking club. I think it's not possible to have carte blanche and every state will pick up what's with sympathy what they need. I think we should have a new political structure in European Union, making all countries and societies to participate in decision-making process. But when decision is taken, then we have to obey. Without this, European Union has not future. So I think that we need more Europe, not less Europe.
This is a possibility. There is possibility Europe remains as a purely economic space of cooperation. We will see what happens with Brexit, because Brexit could easily aggravate the current situation also on European common market. I'm convinced we need a vision which is more ambitious than a purely economic common space. We need to go beyond, towards common foreign policy, common security policy. Otherwise, we keep Europe as incomplete project. We have a common
But what I'm suggesting is that people are now hearing you, and you're saying that this was what was planned all along. But they are saying, I'm sorry, we didn't buy into that. We didn't vote for that. And that is one reason why we're electing right-wing populist governments in Italy. It's one reason why the British have decided to vote to leave. It was a lie all along. And I will come to the other panelists in just a moment. Let me get this from Mr. Frattini.
Yes, it is not a paradox, but those that voted for the far right in Italy, if you would propose Europe ready to engage tomorrow on better protection on terrorism, showing more solidarity vis-à-vis immigration, getting more integration on common European infrastructure, they would say, okay, this new kind of Europe is persuading all those that seem to be reluctant. The problem is that Europe is not responding to the request of those that want more protection, more guarantees, more security, less illegal immigration. This is the problem of Europe today.
Discontent is one of the reasons why the European Union is evolving continuously. When we applied for the UN membership, the Czech Republic I'm talking about, they told us, guys, be prepared, because the European Union going to join will be different than the one you're now sort of applying for the membership to. And it was true. And I can imagine, I mean, my Turkish friends, how they feel when they applied, I mean, so many years ago, and looking at the European Union today. And that's why I'm saying, and I don't see any contradiction in what Mr. President and Franco was saying about more Europe. I'm also for more Europe, but not necessarily through one size fits all. I can imagine that there is a group of the countries within the European Union which go deeper and faster.
Yeah.
Of course, on the basis of certain rules, transparency, inclusivity, that they could be joined later on by others who will be prepared at that time, and that we create a number of the orbits and the rules how you will be engaged with the European Union, but not
the problem with that, which
behind the fence.
You're talking about a two-speed Europe to some extent, is that it's also referred to as a first class and a second class Europe. I'm going to come to you in just a moment, Mr. President, if I may. But
that would be a disaster, in my point of view, because if you separate...
Well, tell Stefan why you think it's a disaster.
Why? Because if you say there are some countries superior, some countries less developed, then you will be in difficulty naming which country is in the first circle, which country is in the second circle. Some countries will protest because they are not in the first circle. This is an old idea. It was spelled many years ago. But the problem is, when we were talking about Greece and Spain, you have mentioned, There is a laboratory test where you have different shaped tubes attached together. The water level or the liquid level is always the same. So the mistake was thinking that Greece is a small country, so it will not harm the euro. Everybody knew that entering into euro, Greece wasn't prepared. The figures were not exactly correct. So actually, this tube, one of the tube, cracked and the liquid went out. So that is the threat on the euro system. But the decision doesn't come. So Germany benefited from the economic crisis and became a political leader of the European Union, and many countries are not happy with that.
If you like, persuade people that this is the right system. How do you go about that?
You cannot go to TV and to have nice speech to change their approach. I think what Mr. Frattini said is very important, that European Union has capacity to respond to different crises or to different needs in particular area or state. But we need precondition for that. Precondition are efficient structure. Precondition is change of democratic responsibility and democratic status of European bodies.
May I ask you, therefore, to go back to the question I raised about 35 minutes ago, which is what particular thing would you change about the European Union to ensure its survival and so that it doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past? Can I start with you, Mr. Frattini, at the far end of the stage?
Well, I would change three things. The most important one, how to reconnect with the normal people, with the ordinary people, people in the streets, people that are persuaded, rightly or wrongly, that Europe is dictating everything on their respective daily life. How to reconnect. Second change, communication. I've been Vice President of European Commission together with Stefan. Communication from European institutions, it is very poor. They are not capable to reach to the people and to make people to understand if people are taking for granted. Third thing, we have to explain to people what are the costs of not having Europe. Because the people believe that Europe is dictating. This is imposing that. Please reflect.
I think it's important to respect the decision of every nation. If Brits are willing to go, let them go. It's their decision, not our decision. But we have to fight for the rest of Europe. And whether they are going to decide to be back, I will be very happy. Great Britain is a very important country. That's one issue. But I would like to go back to what Mr. Frattini says. He mentioned several things important for future of European Union. I consider it probably the same under name of identity. I'm going back to a very important issue of identity. Because what does identity mean? Not just to say, okay, I'm Croat and I'm European, but to feel Europe as our natural surrounding, to feel European government as our government as well, and to suppress, I think, something that's now the biggest danger for Southeastern Europe is nationalism. Nationalism is illness that's killing societies from inside, and it's killing good international relations. So that will be, for me, that's the most important value, and we should fight for it. And just staying and watching what's going on in different countries is not possible. It's irresponsible.